Hi, you've come to the right channel if you love Scotland and all things Scottish. My name's Iain, and I invite you to join me here at Distinctly Scotland as I explore the beauty and wonder of this amazing wee country on my grand tour. Let me help you discover the history, the land, and the culture of Scotland from a Scotsman's perspective. In this series of vlogs, I'll be travelling all across the country, exploring and discovering what makes this land so unique. From ancient castles, to battlefields, whisky distilleries, and to the architecturally magnificent structures found in both Scotland's cities and breathtaking countryside. Along the way, we'll also be experiencing the railways and the transport infrastructure. And I want to introduce you to the wonderful characters that over the centuries have made Scotland such a unique, special and diverse place. You know, there's so much more to Scotland than the boy wizard. This country is absolutely packed with history. So sit back, relax and join me on my grand tour of Scotland. My name's Iain, and I'm going to be showing you some of the most amazing sights in this wonderful country, Scotland. So join me on the grand tour. This is Distinctly Scotland, and you're on the grand tour with me, Iain. Today's video is our part 3 of Edinburgh's Old Town. We'll be looking at this magnificent part of Scotland, and especially at Edinburgh Castle and Holyrood Palace, the Queen's Palace here in Edinburgh. Edinburgh Castle sits upon the core of an extinct volcano, the molten lava having forced its way to the surface some 350 million years ago. It stands proudly some 250 feet above the city of Edinburgh, and according to recent archaeological excavations, it's been a hill fort since the Bronze and early Iron Age, making it the oldest continually inhabited place in Scotland. It was first recorded as a castle during the reign of King Malcolm III in the 11th century, then being known as the Castle of Maidens. And it wasn't until King David I in the mid-12th century that stone buildings of the castle were constructed, and amazingly only one still survives, Sir Margaret's Chapel, which we'll talk about very soon. Well, welcome to the number one attraction in Scotland, Edinburgh Castle. This magnificent structure, sitting on an extinct volcano, has been a royal palace since the days of David I in the 12th century. And this impregnable fortress has never been taken by force. In this castle, in 1566, Mary Queen of Scots gave birth to the first king of the United Kingdom, James I of England, James VI of Scotland, here at Edinburgh Castle. Let's go and find out what it's all about. As we approach the main and only entrance to Edinburgh Castle, we see the royal banner, or the lion rampant, above the gatehouse, flanked by two Scottish heroes, these wonderful statues having been added to the castle in 1929. The statue on the left is Robert the Bruce, who led the Scots to a victory against the English at Bannockburn in 1314. The lion rampant has the motto Nemo me impune laceti, no one provokes me with impunity, or impolitely translated as, don't mess with me or I'll make sure you regret it. On the right is William Wallace, better known to us all as Braveheart. Entering this mighty fortress, we can see within the outer wall the Half Moon Battery above. The Half Moon Battery was built on and around the ruins of the huge medieval David's Tower, which was begun in 1367 by King David II. The tower came crashing down during the long siege of 1571-73. We're climbing up now towards the Portcullis Gate, past the ubiquitous gift shop, which every historic Scotland property has, and the Portcullis Gate was built after the Lang Siege. The Lang Siege describes when supporters of the recently abdicated Queen Mary barricaded themselves in the castle to support her in her cause to regain the monarchy. They opposed the regent, the Earl of Lennox, who was entrusted with the care of the infant King James VI. It lasted an incredible 2 years. Climbing up now towards the Mills Mount Battery, where we see lined up the mighty cannons ready for any potential attackers. These particular guns being forged at the castle in 1810 during the Napoleonic Wars. At this vantage point, defenders of the castle have an excellent view over the north and northwest areas of Edinburgh towards the River Forth. And this is a part of Edinburgh that is incredibly noisy at a particular time of the day, as this is the venue of the famous time signal, the 1 o'clock gun. The ceremony of the 1 o'clock gun dates back to 1861 and was created to allow the ships in the Forth estuary to accurately set their maritime clocks. Through their telescopes they could see the puff of smoke as the gun was fired and possibly hear it. Now, a tourist attraction, the gun is fired each day at 1300 hours precisely, except Sundays, Good Friday and Christmas Day. Let's see if you can hear it. Did you hear it? Of course, we're in no doubt now exactly what time it is. We continue our journey towards the west of the castle, down towards the National War Museum and the fantastic statue of Earl Haig on his horse. The area was originally called Hospital Square, as it was the location of the military hospital in Edinburgh Castle, the building behind the equestrian statue of the Field Marshal Douglas Haig. All the buildings around the square house the artefacts of the Scottish National War Museum. Field Marshal Douglas Haig, or first Earl Haig, was born in Edinburgh and was one of the most famous soldiers the United Kingdom has ever known. Following a distinguished military career, he finally achieved the highest rank in the British Army to become Field Marshal, and most notably becoming the Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in France during most of the First World War. Despite his critics, his leadership was instrumental in ensuring victory over the Germans in that horrible conflict. A conflict that killed approximately 135,000 Scots. However, we now take the steps up to Butts Battery, and we can appreciate the vista to the west of the castle, looking over the west side of Edinburgh. And in the foreground we can see the lovely red sandstone building that was once the Caledonian Railway Station for the Caledonian Railway Company, which is now the Caledonian Hotel. Better to see it in the summertime, as we took a shot in the middle of the year when the trees were all full of leaves. We're now arriving at the Scottish National War Museum, which tells the proud story of 4 centuries of Scottish military history. full of precious exhibits of the military campaigns the Scottish regiments have participated in over the centuries. It tells the story of these fearsome, kilt-wearing soldiers who were at the vanguard in most of the campaigns of the British Army over the years. This was indeed a grand life for a Scotsman. You can see the recruitment posters for the various regiments, enticing the lads to join up and have a great life and great pay and conditions. The posters were there to make the army look like a fantastic career and a great alternative to life in poor Scotland. You can see that they detailed the rates of pay there, and also the Seaforth Highlanders are all happy, smiling chaps. It just looks like a great life for a young man. The finest job in the world. You can work, play all over the globe, and they didn't actually mention killing people, but it's an army recruitment poster. Join the army. The first official Highland regiment was raised for the British Army in 1740, and this was the Black Watch. The Scottish troops, with their kilts and their bagpipes, had a fearsome reputation. The Germans in the First World War called them the Woman from Hell. In the famous Robert Gibbs painting, The Thin Red Line, you can see the Scots troops, bayonets fixed, at Balaclava in the Crimean War. A tough, ferocious line that nobody would want to take on. After the Act of Union in 1707, the Scottish Army and Navy merged with those of England, and the new British Army incorporated the existing Scottish regiments. The 3 vessels of the small Royal Scottish Navy were transferred to the Royal Navy. We now leave the museum and head back up Castle Rock, past where the 1 o'clock gun was. As we turn right, we look up towards the new barracks built in 1799, now the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards Museum, and the Governor's House, 1742. We're now nearing the most secure part of the castle. The arch ahead is called Foog's Gate, built by Charles II. And ahead of us lies the oldest building in Edinburgh, St Margaret's Chapel, built by David I in 1130 to commemorate his mother, Margaret, who became a saint in 1250. We're now turning towards the highest point of the volcano. You can see the rock sticking out. We're heading now towards the most historic part of the castle. This is Crown Square, and ahead of us you can see the Royal Palace, which was a palace right up to the reign of King James V. Many important things have happened in this part of the castle, the most important being when Mary Queen of Scots, she gave birth to the first king of the United Kingdom, James VI. He became James I of England. That was in 1603. Also in the Royal Palace, we have the Scottish Crown Jewels, or the Honours of Scotland, and also the Stone of Scone. The Stone of Scone is a block of sandstone that's been part of the coronation ceremony of Scottish monarchs since King Kenneth MacAlpin in 843. Every monarch has sat on the stone as they've been crowned, and outrageously it was stolen by Scotland's worst enemy, Edward I, or the Hammer of the Scots. In 1296, he took it to Westminster Abbey in London, and he made a special throne to accommodate the Stone of Destiny, as it's also known, to humiliate the Scots. Thankfully, the present monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, returned the Stone of Scone to its rightful home here in Edinburgh Castle in 1996. However, when Charles is crowned, the stone will be taken to Westminster Abbey to be placed under the throne as he becomes king. This time, we hope it doesn't take 700 years to have it returned. We now pass the Great Hall with the coat of arms of James IV on the side, built in the early part of the 16th century by James IV. Also known as the Banqueting Hall, it was built to celebrate his marriage in 1503 to Henry VIII's sister Margaret Tudor, bringing together the Scottish and English royal houses. Detailing on the building has thistles and roses signifying the national emblems of both Scotland and England. Now, the really special feature of this fantastic building is the wooden roof built by local shipbuilders from Leith, Edinburgh's port. Effectively, the roof is an upturned hull of a ship, and in its construction, not one nail was used, only wooden pegs, in the hammer beam roof style, using stone corbels. This amazing roof still stands today some 500 plus years later, one of only two surviving medieval halls in Scotland, the other being the Great Hall at Stirling Castle. The Great Hall was completed in 1511, just 2 years before the Scottish defeat at the Battle of Flodden, when sadly James was killed. So he didn't have much time to enjoy his banqueting hall. And as you can see, the interior of the hall shows the weapons of war from over the years, the swords and the different daggers used by Scottish troops. As we continue around the buildings in Crown Square, we have some of the royal apartments with some fantastic coats of arms depicted on the walls, mainly to do with James VI. Let's have a look. We can see the inscription here, and for all you Latin scholars, Jacobus Primus Britanniae Franciae et Hiberniae Rex. Roughly translated, well, exactly translated, King James I of Britain, France and Ireland. And on this other wall we have another coat of arms of James VI, this time with the Latin inscription Beate Pacificae. Blessed are the peacemakers. Now you'll notice that the coat of arms of James VI changes from the coat of arms of James IV and James V. We saw before that James IV had the two unicorns in his coat of arms, with the lion rampant. It was the same for James V and his daughter, Mary Queen of Scots, the two unicorns. However, with the union of the crowns in 1603, when James VI became the king of not just Scotland but the whole of the United Kingdom, it changed. No longer two unicorns, it was a unicorn and a lion. And the unicorn and the lion is the coat of arms of Scotland to this day. But the official coat of arms for the United Kingdom has it reversed, with the lion on the left and the unicorn on the right. I hope that explains the coats of arms. We now come back out into Crown Square and we look to the building on the north side, the newest building, built in 1927. It's the Scottish National War Memorial, to commemorate the dead of the 1914-18 war. As we were saying before, over 135,000 men died. 1 in every 3 Scots that went to the war died. And every man, woman who's been killed in action in any conflict anywhere in the world since the First World War, their names are added to the book inside this building. To the east of Crown Square lies the Half Moon Battery. This round-shaped wall is the main thing one sees when looking at the castle from the esplanade. and it covers the remains of David's Tower. David's Tower was built by King David II, Robert Bruce's son. But in the final bombardment that ended the Lang Siege of 1573, the tower was sent crashing down by the English. So the Half Moon Battery is what has replaced it. And from this amazing vantage point, there are great views to the venue of the famous Royal Military Tattoo, an incredible military show held each summer to entertain thousands of happy visitors. We move on to St Margaret's Chapel, the oldest building still standing in Edinburgh. On the way we get another great view to the north of Edinburgh, and charmingly the cemetery for military dogs. Dogs used as regimental mascots, buried here. Above is the chapel and the Mons Meg heavy cannon. St Margaret's Chapel is the oldest building in Edinburgh. This Category A listed building, built in the early 12th century by King David I in memory of his mother. It was spared from general destruction of the castle by Robert the Bruce. Basically, he didn't want the English to get hold of it. And the chapel was used for storage after the 16th century Protestant Reformation, but thankfully restored to its former use in the 19th century. Mons Meg is a 20-inch diameter cannon or medieval bombard that was given in 1454 to King James II by his cousin, the Duke of Burgundy, and has only been fired on ceremonial occasions since the 16th century. It was fired on the occasion of Mary Queen of Scots' marriage to the Dauphin of France in 1558. And it took 150 pounds of gunpowder to hurl the massive 350-pound cannonballs. Wow! Let us now descend the Lang steps to retrace our journey back to the gatehouse, and this is the end of our visit to Edinburgh Castle. All the monarchs, when they left Edinburgh Castle to get to their palace at Holyrood, had to travel down the Royal Mile. Let us do the same, but this time we'll do it rather quickly. Welcome to Holyrood Palace, Her Majesty the Queen's palace here in Scotland. And every summer she hosts garden parties in the gardens behind the palace here. This has been a royal palace for hundreds of years, and we're very proud to have it here in Edinburgh. Unfortunately, Her Majesty the Queen will not allow us to film inside the palace, so we'll only be able to film outside. But let's now talk about the story of the wonderful Holyrood Palace. Well, welcome to Her Majesty the Queen's official residence in Scotland, and as such, we will show it due respect. Every summer, Her Majesty hosts garden parties in the palace grounds, which she has been doing since the 1950s, very hard-working lady. The palace traces its history to that man again, James IV. Gosh, the things he did to impress Margaret Tudor, as well as the great hall at the castle. He built her a new palace, down here where he used to go hunting for deer in Holyrood Park. The story starts when King David I was out hunting in 1128. He had a vision, the vision of a glowing cross between the antlers of a stag that he was hunting. Obviously a message from God, so he had an abbey built on the spot, Holyrood. Subsequently that name meant Holy Cross, the cross on the stag. But what we can see today is mainly the extension built in the late 17th century under King Charles II. The only part of the buildings that remain from James V's early 16th century input is the northwest tower, which is on the left when looking at the palace from the front. As far as James IV's gift to Mary Tudor, sadly, that's long since gone. Interestingly, the identical tower to the one built was rebuilt by Charles across the courtyard to match it, and that's what we see today. The beautifully appointed accommodation in the interior has some amazing portraits of past monarchs. I suppose the man who did the refurb should get his picture on the wall, and this is a magnificent portrait of Charles II. This stunning portrait is found within the impressive state apartments that are used for investitures, meetings with Scotland's First Minister and other dignitaries, and interestingly enough, a formal dining room that's actually used by the Queen and members of the royal family during their annual summer stay. Their lavish meals using a specially commissioned silver service that had been presented to King George V and Queen Mary to mark their silver jubilee in 1935. The largest room within these state apartments is the Great Gallery, and along its walls hangs 111 paintings of kings of Scotland from time immemorial. These were painted by the Dutch artist Jacob Jacobs de Vet II in 1686. Unfortunately, he didn't have any reference to what the kings looked like, so instead he painted them in the likeness of his assistant. And as you can see, they all look the same. Another superb portrait is this one of Mary Queen of Scots, which shows the character and strength of that fine lady. On the 9th of March in 1566, whilst heavily pregnant with the future King James VI of Scotland, she sadly had to witness in her chambers here at Holyrood the brutal murder of her personal assistant David Rizzio at the hands of her useless husband Lord Darnley and his murderous cohorts. If you visit the palace, you'll see the exact site of that dastardly crime. In 1745, Bonnie Prince Charlie, with his tail up, thinking he was going to take the crown of the United Kingdom, he lodged in Holyrood Palace and had hosted some parties and general frivolity. Unfortunately, his claims to the throne didn't come to fruition, and we all know the sad tale of his demise. Let's now go outside to look at the ancient abbey and the gardens of Holyrood. Well, that's the end of part 3 of my Old Town tour. I hope you enjoyed it. These films I've been making can only skim over the history. A history has taken hundreds of years to make. But hopefully you've enjoyed it and it's inspired you to maybe do some more of your own research, or maybe even come and join me here in Edinburgh on a tour. I have to say that the Old Town in the 19th century, by the mid-19th century, had become a complete mess. It was a slum, and most of the people, the intelligentsia, the money had moved across the Norloch to the Georgian New Town, which is the subject of my next film, Edinburgh's Georgian New Town. I hope you can join me in that. Look after yourselves. God bless. I would love you to subscribe to my channel, and if you want to help me continue making these videos, you could maybe sponsor me on my Patreon page. Details below. Thank you.